The most powerful king in West Africa walked toward exile in silence. No chains, no struggle. Just the quiet crunch of British boots on the red earth of Kumasi. The year was 1896. This was King Prempeh I of Ashanti, ruler of an empire feared, respected, and envied. His people were undefeated warriors, masters of statecraft, of diplomacy, of war. So why did he surrender without a single battle? Why did a kingdom that humbled every enemy, from rival Akan states to European armies, fall without raising a single war drum? The answer was not written on a battlefield. It was buried in ledgers, and one devastating line in the Treaty of Fomena. Ashanti was not defeated by firepower. Ashanti was defeated by economics. This is the story of the gold trap, the slow, brilliant, methodical strangling of an African empire. A war fought not with bullets, but with receipts. To understand the trap, you first have to understand the engine of Ashanti power. For over a century, the empire ran on a brutal but effective business model. They sold slaves for guns and gunpowder. The Ashanti exchanged enslaved war captives for European firearms. With those guns, they expanded, united Akan lands, and built a military powerhouse in the forest belt. Then the 1800s arrived with a tidal wave. Britain abolished the slave trade, and their warships patrolled the coast. The old economy died overnight. Ashanti faced a choice: collapse or adapt. They adapted with genius. They pivoted from human trade to gold and palm oil, creating a modern cash flow economy. And to stabilize it, they invented a kind of national tax code, the gold dust tax. This was an ingenious, compulsory income tax paid directly in gold dust, the national currency. Every single trader, farmer, or miner was obligated to pay a portion to the royal treasury. Regional governors, the Abrampong, were the empire's accountants, collecting gold and sending it to Kumasi. This tax guaranteed a constant liquid cash flow that could not be intercepted by rivals. This was the genius to fund a standing army for over 100 years. This funding had one destination: the European coast, where it was traded for gunpowder, lead, and modern rifles. The system was designed to be financially self-sufficient and impenetrable to any external enemy. It was brilliant, efficient, but it had a fatal flaw. It depended on absolute trust from the governors who collected the gold, and there was no audit system. A flaw the British one day would exploit. The Ashanti's self-sufficiency created their greatest vulnerability. To turn gold into guns, Ashanti needed one thing: unfettered access to the sea. The Fonte states, a confederation of coastal kingdoms, sat directly between the Ashanti heartland and the European forts. The Fonte had three superpowers. Their location placed them between Ashanti and the sea. Their alliances with the British made them convenient buffers. Their confederacy in 1868 gave them a political structure. To Ashanti, the Fonte were simply the gatekeepers of the ocean, as they are located on the coast. And in a world where your survival depended on European guns, whoever controlled your road to the ocean controlled your destiny. Ashanti held indirect influence over the coast, Their caravans brought gold, ivory, and kola nuts to European forts, British, Dutch, and Danish. In return, they received cloth, metal goods, and most importantly, modern rifles. Ashanti didn't need to occupy the coast. They simply had to make coastal states cooperate, willingly or otherwise. They can also choose the European country they want to trade with based on negotiation, so there was competition for trade among the Europeans. Then came the British pivot. The British were done competing for trade. They wanted empire. The British entry was a slow, strategic process. They positioned themselves as protectors of the Fonte, building a buffer state that constantly challenged Ashanti's sovereign right to the trade routes. The British masterstroke came in 1872. They purchased every remaining Dutch and Danish fort, every port, every trading post. With one purchase, Britain seized a monopoly. The British now controlled the only door to the outside world. For Ashanti, this was an economic declaration of war. The Ashanti responded by launching the Sovereignty War to reclaim their access and break the British monopoly. The British won the military engagement, and British troops marched through dense forest, disease-ridden terrain, and ambush-heavy hills all the way to Kumasi. They burned the royal capital in 1874, not out of hatred, but as a brutal demonstration, a message, a threat, a precedent. But they didn't stay. They couldn't. The forest would chew them up. Instead, they'd imposed a treaty that would do the work an army could not. The treaty demanded that Ashanti pay 50,000 ounces of gold as war indemnity. At today's value, tens of millions of dollars. At that time, an economic earthquake. This was not a random fine. It was a calculated economic weapon designed not to punish, but to destabilize. By demanding a massive payment, Britain aimed to weaken Ashanti militarily, less gold to buy rifles, weaken them politically, force recognition of Fonte independence, and sever Ashanti influence on the coast. Weaken them economically, break the gold dust tax system from the inside. If Ashanti refused to pay, Britain would simply return, burn Kumasi again, seize hostages, and install a puppet king. But this massive, unpayable debt triggered something far more destructive: the exposure of the empire's internal disease. The Prempeh, the powerful governors, had long discovered that the gold dust tax system lacked a centralized audit. They began engaging in systemic tax evasion. The Prempeh illegally diverted the king's revenue into private coffers, using the stolen gold to raise personal armies and private networks of loyalty. King Prempeh I was politically paralyzed. He could not fire his tax chiefs because they now had too much military power. The Ashanti treasury was being starved, while his rivals within the state grew rich and bold. This betrayal is the ultimate lesson in integrity. If you appreciate uncovering the economic engines behind history's great conflicts, make sure you hit subscribe and like this video. It helps us uncover more of history's secrets. The trap snapped shut in the 1890s. The British used the unpaid indemnity as a legal justification for a final ultimatum. King Prempeh I appealed to his Prempeh, the men who had grown fat on the empire's gold, to bring forth their gold to pay the national debt. They refused. The chiefs saw more profit in keeping their gold than in saving the nation. The British economic pressure had successfully destroyed the economic incentive for loyalty that held the empire together. With his treasury empty and his army's supply lines cut, Prempeh I knew the war was lost. When the British returned in 1896, they arrested the king and exiled his trusted financial advisors. They didn't just capture a king, They foreclosed on a debt. The empire, built on mountains of gold, was left bankrupt and fractured. The war had already been lost, not in 1896, but the day the empire's own governors learned they could grow richer than the king. The fall of the Ashanti Empire is a brutal lesson. An empire can survive a global economic shift, but it cannot survive the betrayal of its own heart. The most formidable army is useless if the treasury behind it is built on sand. The British defeated the Ashanti supply chain, and they did it with a pen. But the Ashanti were not the only empire whose fate rested on a single resource. Next time, we move across the Sahara to investigate the vast strategic empire that relied on another vital single resource: salt. We reveal the political strategy and the ruthless trade war over salt, the white gold of the Sahara. If you understand now how economics truly shapes history, help this channel uncover more financial secrets of the past. Subscribe for more and let us know in the comments, which empire's collapse should we investigate next?